David stood up and said goodbye to them, telling them he needs to get dressed so they could leave. He went to his room. Just as Jake came out of his room, already dressed, he wore the jacket that was lent to her when they were at the river. Jake looked very handsome in the jacket, black polo shirt, tight jeans, and leather boots. His hair was in a half-man bun. Chanty remembered that she had taken off the jacket Jake lent her when she was vomiting from teleportation but had not put it away. How embarrassing! After using it, she had just left it out on the balcony. She hadn't even bothered to clean it before returning it to Jake. Despite her embarrassment, Chanty stood up to meet Jake as he walked towards them. Her companions sitting on the sofa followed her with their eyes, and Jake seemed a bit surprised as she approached him. "Jake. I'm so sorry, it's embarrassing. I remembered I didn't put away the jacket when I took it off after we arrived." "I'm really sorry," Chanty said, deeply embarrassed by her negligence. Her face showed that she was pleading for forgiveness. Jake, however, seemed unaffected by what happened to his jacket. "Don't worry, Samuel took care of our things when we arrived, including my jacket," he said with a slight smile. But that didn't erase Chanty's feeling of shame. "Chanty, it's okay. Sometimes Jake just throws his stuff anywhere. It's good that Samuel is here to retrieve it for him," Marco shouted jokingly, making everyone laugh. Chanty glanced at them and then walked back to the sofa to sit down, followed by Jake. But Jake didn't sit, he stood there with his hands in his pockets. "Take care out there, Jake," Marco said, his face turning serious as he looked at Jake. "They'll surely be watching," Marco added. Everyone's faces turned serious, and they looked at Chanty. She felt a fear of what might happen to David when he went there. Chanty looked at Robert, wondering if he knew about his master, David. Then she looked at Marco, as if asking if it was okay to talk about these things in front of Robert. "Chanty, there are no secrets from Robert. He knows our family, and your father, Don Lorenzo, knows him too," Justin said. Their faces were serious at that moment. Chanty was worried, her mind filled with bad thoughts. It seemed her companions could read her thoughts. "Chanty, it's better not to think negatively to avoid unnecessary stress. We're doing everything we can to ensure everything goes well." "Don't worry, we have our defenses too," Luis said, making their companions smile, especially Jacob. "We know what to do with them," Jacob added, looking at Chanty intently. Jake was also staring at her, while Robert faced her. "Miss Chanty, is there anything specific you'd like me to do at your vineyard?" Robert asked respectfully. "Could you check if Arnold is safe? He's one of our workers there. Arnold Santos is his full name. You will recognize him immediately if he is there in the vineyard because he always wears a brown cowboy hat. I did not see him at the mansion before the fire, so I expected that he was not among the casualties. I also did not see my white horse outside the mansion, only he can take care of Rhonda," referring to her horse. "He might have secured my horse before the mansion caught fire," Chanty asked cautiously, her voice pleading. "I will, Miss Chanty," Robert replied respectfully, with a slight nod and assuring look. "I'll head to the garage and wait for David there," Jake said, looking at Chanty and then at their companions. They nodded and watched Jake walk out the main door. Luis stood up too. "I'll also wait in the car," Luis said, looking at his companions and saying goodbye. He looked at Chanty and slightly bowed with a smile. "I'll leave you now, Chanty," Luis said respectfully. "I'll go with you, Luis," Robert said, standing up. He glanced at Marco, Justin, Gabriel, Jacob and Chanty. Robert also bowed slightly in front of Chanty, respectfully said goodbye to his companions, and left with Luis through the main door. The five of them were left on the sofa. They just looked at each other, but Chanty noticed that Jacob's gaze was different. If she used to feel uncomfortable with Jake's gaze, Jacob's was even more intense, like his eyes could see through her. She was too embarrassed to tell him off since they had just met. Jacob's eyes were strikingly blue. She tried not to look at him, avoiding his gaze. She only glanced at him occasionally. Silence filled the room as they waited for David to come out. After a while, David emerged. David looked very handsome in a long white jacket, white polo shirt, tight-washed jeans and leather boots. Anyone who saw him would surely take a second look, Chanty thought. David looked at the five of them, especially at her, and smiled. "Chanty, we're leaving," David said with a smile as he approached them. The five of them stood up. "We need to take separate cars," David said as he stood in front of the five of them. "It will be better for us to be spread out." He looked at each of them in turn. "All right, we're leaving now. Take care of things here and look after Chanty," David said, looking at Marco, Justin, Gabriel, and Jacob. "Chanty, don't worry, I'll handle this," David said, his voice full of assurance as he looked at her. "Don't bother seeing me out. Just stay here," David added. Then he walked out the main door. They watched as David left through the door. They sat back down on the sofa and heard the sound of cars starting and honking. Chanty saw Samuel running outside, probably trying to catch up with his master who was leaving. "Chanty, you need to rest now." "Don't worry, David will update us tomorrow," Justin said, as the four of them looked at her. "Lorena's room is next to yours, and you can call her anytime on the intercom," Marco added. "Thank you both so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude for what you're doing," Chanty said sincerely in front of Justin and Marco. "But there's something I want to know. Are your guests here because of me? Is Jacob here because of my situation?" she asked curiously. She couldn't quite grasp why so many people were getting involved because of her. Was her problem with the Mondragons really that serious? The four men exchanged glances before Gabriel spoke up. "The Mondragons are not ordinary, Chanty. What you've seen so far is just a scratch on the surface," Gabriel said seriously, his gaze intense. She fell silent for a moment after Gabriel's words. She wondered, what kind of life did she have now? She felt like the answers to her questions were as elusive as finding a needle in a haystack. What if you just let me face the Mondragons myself so I can ask them directly what they need from me? What my family's fault is to them? I'll go to the authorities," she stammered, unsure if her statements were correct. They all looked at each other, and Jacob smiled at her words. His handsome features became more prominent when he smiled. "We understand what you're saying, Chanty, but things aren't that simple." "Surely you're aware of what they're capable of," Justin said. "I just want to say that if they ever get hold of you, it's the end for all of us." "I mean, all of us living here on Earth, Chanty," Jacob said, his tone deadly serious. He stared at her intensely, as did the three other men with him. She felt a cold water poured on her as she heard from Jacob. Her body felt paralyzed, her muscles trembling. "This is not just a simple family problem between you and the Mondragons. Think of it as a problem of the whole world between the earth and sky. That's how serious it is. Hopefully you'll understand when you reach your 18th birthday, when you realize everything," Jacob said slowly but with emphasis in his voice as he mentioned each word. The three beside Jacob remained silent. She felt uncomfortable with the stares of the four men in front of her. How will she accept the information she is receiving now? Never in her life did she expect this to happen. People like this, like Jake, like David, even the Mondragons. "Chanty, you don't need to know everything all at once," Jacob said straightforwardly. "Let's take it slowly. Eventually you'll understand everything. Sorry if I'm being direct. That's the only way we can describe to you how serious these things are. I know your mind is in chaos, but there's no other way. You'll find out eventually. For now, you need to rest. Let's talk again tomorrow, it's getting late," Jacob explained. The three men showed sympathy, looking at her. "How can I rest if I can't sleep from overthinking?" she muttered in complaint. To whom is she complaining? She wondered. The four men just stared at her, showing concern in their eyes. "I want to think that these things happening are just simple family issues. How can I understand everything? Like what David said, the Mondragons need virgin blood because of my bloodline? What bloodline do I have? What's special about my blood that they need? Are they vampires?" She had so many questions. She looked at each of them one by one because any of them could answer. It's embarrassing to say, but there are many virgins in the world, not just me. My mind can't process to understand what they need from me. Is it really going to be that painful if they get me? What will they do to me? Her questions seemed endless. She lowered her voice because she didn't want Lorena and the other household staff to hear, but she wanted answers to her questions. Gabriel sighed and leaned back on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. Chanty, if I answer your questions now, you might not be able to sleep tonight, so I prefer to answer you tomorrow or another day so you can rest. You need that. Justin said softly, almost pleading to stop their conversation for now. She understood. Justin is right, Chanty, Jacob said, also leaning back on the sofa with his hands behind his head, looking at the ceiling. He was deep in thought. For now, let's focus on allocating the right time for each occasion, Marco added. She stood up and excused herself, saying she would go to her room. She walked slowly to the guest room, feeling weary, while being watched by the 4 men left in the living room. She entered the room with a heavy heart, feeling powerless, and her body also felt heavy, perhaps due to excessive thinking. She found Lorena inside, cleaning and tidying up her mess in the bathroom and bedroom. She observed Lorena, who was younger than her nanny Maria, respectable in appearance, and formally dressed. She never thought Lorena would become her nanny. It's not surprising because Lorena is actually David's mother's personal assistant. She sat on the bed, feeling her body, and indeed, she was very sleepy with heavy eyelids. She saw Lorena approaching her with a smile. Miss Chanty, is there anything you would like me to do? Or do you need anything else? Lorena asked respectfully. No more, Lorena, I'll open the groceries tomorrow because I'm really sleepy, she said while looking at the grocery bags on the table next to the bed. Lorena understood her employer and respectfully excused herself to leave the room. Chanty nodded with a smile and said good night. She was startled and suddenly woke up, hearing someone calling. She heard a whisper in her ear, calling her name, a soft whisper that seemed to float in the air. Was the voice carried by the wind, constantly repeating her name, a woman's voice? She sat up in bed. She was sleeping soundly, but was suddenly awakened by the voice that was enticing her hearing, calling her, Chanty. She's not moving, but her eyes were scanning the room, trying to locate where the voice was coming from. She looked at the clock. It was 3:15 in the morning. She didn't notice what time she had fallen asleep last night. She listened again. The voice was gone. Maybe she was just dreaming? Or was it just a hallucination? She got out of her bed and took some warm water to drink. She must have been very tired, so she felt these sensations. That's what she thought. The room was bright even though only one lampshade was on. She lay back down on the bed and closed her eyes. Chanty, there it was again. Someone was calling her name, but very softly, as if it was blending with the wind. She felt a chill, opened her eyes but didn't move, waiting to hear if there would be anything more. Chanty. There it was again. It didn't go away. But the voice was softer now. Was her hearing playing tricks on her? Was she really hearing her name being called? It must be just the result of her stress, she thought. She got up and went straight to the bathroom. She washed her face. It was too early to get up on that day. She was sure that her companions in the house were still asleep. She thought about taking an early shower. Maybe she didn't sleep long, but she wanted to pour cold water over herself to fully awaken her senses. She took a shower, the cold water waking her mind and body. Her body was now fully awake. After showering, she looked for casual clothes to wear. She wished there were casual clothes available as she searched the cabinet for a t-shirt and pants, which she liked to wear daily. But what she found was a white long sleeve and leather pants, no jeans or t-shirt. That would have to do, she thought. The cabinet was full of formal dresses, long ones, and if there were any short ones, they were too sexy. She wasn't used to wearing sexy and short clothes. After dressing, she dried her hair with a hairdryer, styled her hair in front of the mirror, and put on a little perfume. She thought about going out for coffee. Although she had ready-made coffee and tea inside, she still preferred a cappuccino. She didn't want to wake Lorena up so early. She left the room, opening and closing the door gently to avoid making noise. As she walked towards the dining area, her eyes surveyed the surroundings. It was very quiet inside, and she was probably the only one awake at that time. The inside and outside of the house were bright due to the night lights left on. She thought about exploring David's entire house that day. She went to the coffee machine and made a cappuccino. She heard noises from the kitchen. Someone else had woken up at that time. It must be the household staff. They wake up so early. David's staff are indeed hardworking, she thought. While she was sipping her coffee, Laura, David's cook, came out of the kitchen door. Her suspicion was correct. Laura approached her with a smile, bowed gently, and greeted her respectfully. She returned the smile and invited Laura to have coffee with her, but Laura declined, saying she had already had her coffee. Laura returned to the kitchen, leaving her alone at the dining table. She looked around every corner of the dining area and at the pictures hanging on the wall. Only in the living room was there a family picture of David. She thought of taking her coffee to the living room, picked up her cup, and walked there. She sat near the picture of her father and whispered, "Papa, I miss you so much," as she sipped her coffee. She stayed in the living room for quite a while, looking at the picture with her father. She suspected that David's family was not just wealthy but might have royal ancestry because of what she observed and noticed about her friend. She really planned to ask David about it, and even Marco and Justin. Chanty. There it was again. Returning. This time the voice was soft, but she heard it clearly, as if it was whispering right in her ear. She sprang up from the sofa, looked around, and was certain that it wasn't just her hearing because her mind was fully alert. She was not mistaken. She is not moving, just sensing, listening with her ears. Where is that voice coming from? Where are you? Who are you? She whispers, only she can hear her whisper. The voice did not return. It took her a while before she thought to stand up and return the empty coffee cup to the kitchen. She decided to go to the kitchen herself to return the cup to be washed. As she entered the kitchen, she saw Laura and her assistant working, preparing vegetables and meat on the kitchen's center island. The kitchen was spacious and beautiful, unlike any she had seen before, as grand as the living room. It was different from the kitchen in their mansion. The surprise was evident on the faces of the two women. They probably didn't expect her to come in. Laura immediately came to greet her and took the cup she was holding. "Oh, Miss Chanty, you shouldn't have bothered to bring this. You could have just left it on the table. We would have cleaned up, even in the living room where you had your coffee," Laura explained, somewhat embarrassed. Chanty just smiled in response. Laura's assistant just looked at them. "Good morning, Miss Chanty," said Sally, Laura's assistant cook, with a polite greeting. She smiled intently at her. "Good morning to you too," Chanty replied cheerfully while looking at Sally. "I just brought it here, Laura, because I have nothing else to do," she explained with a smile to Laura. Although she was impressed by the beauty of the kitchen and wanted to exclaim how beautiful it was, she didn't continue because she was shy. "Miss Chanty, would you like to eat?" "I can serve you some food," Laura asked with concern and respect in her voice. "Oh no, Laura, I'll eat later, thank you for the offer," she said with a smile, and then she left the kitchen.